Madam President.
The junior senator from Hawaii.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the following senators be recognized to speak prior to the scheduled roll call vote. Hirono for up to 10 minutes, Stabenow for up to 5 minutes, Klobuchar for up to 10 minutes, Murray for up to 5 minutes, Schumer for up to 5 minutes. Further, that the mandatory quorum call with respect to the cloture vote and the motion to proceed to calendar number 420S4554 be waived. Finally, that the cloture motion with respect to the Kiko nomination be withdrawn and at a time to be determined by the majority leader in consultation with the Republican leader, the Senate vote on confirmation of the Kiko nomination.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Madam President.
The junior senator from Hawaii.
After Dobbs came down, we worried about what a post-Dobbs America would look like. Would other reproductive freedoms be attacked and stripped away piece by piece across the country? Now, 2 years later, we know the answer is yes. In Dobbs, the Supreme Court, quote, returned the issue of abortion to the states, quote, and eliminated a constitutional right women in our country had relied on for nearly 50 years. We often refer to the states as laboratories of democracy. Sadly, these laboratories are now experimenting on women with dystopian results. This hellish experimentation has resulted in devastating consequences for women and families across the country who are now subject to state-imposed abortion bans. As a result of over 20 states enacting abortion bans, some without exception for rape or incest, women all over our country are being forced to travel far distances for abortion care, or worse, to continue pregnancies regardless of the risks. Their stories are horrifying. Stories like that of Kate Cox, a mother of 2 in Texas, whose pregnancy was threatening her life and her ability to have more children in the future. Despite her deteriorating physical condition, Texas officials ruled that she wasn't sick enough to get an abortion, forcing her to travel out of state to receive the life-saving care she needed. While Kate had the ability to travel, so many other women in her condition do not and are forced to suffer the unimaginable consequences of Republicans' obsession with power and control. What's more, healthcare workers in states with abortion bans are living under a constant threat of criminal prosecution. When patients in states with abortion bans present with signs of a miscarriage, doctors are unable to provide emergency treatment, going against their legal and professional duty of care and years of expert training. As a result, many of these providers are fleeing their practices, contributing to reproductive healthcare deserts all across the country. The cruelty of Dobbs has also resulted in an increase in infant mortality in states with abortion bans, as women are forced to carry fetuses with fatal birth defects to term. Let's be clear, abortion bans aren't about protecting anyone. They're about the right's obsession with power and control, plain and simple. But while Republicans continue their march toward a nationwide abortion ban, they refuse to be honest with the American people. Time after time, Republicans have come to this floor insisting that they support women's health, only to turn around and vote against bill after bill that would do just that. Despite their rhetoric, they voted en masse against the right to contraception, the right to IVF, and have consistently blocked any effort in this chamber to protect women's fundamental rights. But still, my Republican colleagues insist they stand with women. And today, they have the opportunity to put their money where their mouths are The Reproductive Freedom for Women Act is straightforward. It simply expresses support for protecting access to reproductive health care. The bill is one page long and does not codify Roe or enact any policy changes. This should be a no-brainer for anyone who actually supports women and our right to control our own bodies. But if passed as prologue, it is safe to say Republicans will vote against this bill today, only to insist tomorrow that they are the party of freedom. Give me a break. Democrats, meanwhile, are determined to restore, protect, and strengthen reproductive rights. And we will not stop fighting until we succeed in this. That is why today I am proud to stand with my fellow Democrats in voting for the Reproductive Freedom for Women Act to support reproductive rights and health care for all. Madam President, I yield.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm really proud to be joining the senior senator from Hawaii and other colleagues that will be coming to the floor to talk about such an important topic and bill as the Reproductive Freedom for Women Act. We know that for 50 years, Roe v. Wade protected our freedom to make our own healthcare decisions. Then 2 years ago, it was gone. I can't believe that today's young women, including my daughter and granddaughters, have fewer freedoms than their mothers and their grandmothers did. And frankly, Madam President, we're furious in Michigan. Want to know just how furious? Well, in Michigan, we turned our anger into action, and in November of 2022, we had the largest voter turnout for a midterm election ever. And one of the measures on the ballot enshrined a right to reproductive freedom in our Michigan Constitution. And it passed by a strong 13-point margin because Michiganders understand that healthcare decisions should be made by individual women, not by judges, not by politicians. And by the way, we hear all the time on the other side that it's a debate between should it be federal politicians or state politicians? Neither. This is about individuals having the freedom to make their own healthcare decisions, and I can't believe we have to debate this in 2024 in America. But a lot of folks just haven't gotten the message yet. Today, 22 states now have near total bans or severe restrictions on abortion services. And that means 1 out of 3 women now live under extreme or dangerous abortion bans. And we know who's to blame for this because they brag about it all the time. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And since the fall of Roe, Republicans have continued their assault on access to contraception, on IVF, a choice for those who desperately want a baby and need some additional help from science to help make that happen, to severe and total restrictions on abortion services. Unfortunately, MAGA Republicans want total control of our lives and total control of our fundamental freedoms. Last month, Democrats acted to protect these freedoms for women. And unfortunately, every time we brought bills to the Senate floor, Republicans blocked them. And unfortunately, we know that they won't stop there. We know that the Republican Party, if they have their way, will create a national abortion ban, which means Michigan's constitutional protections that people worked very hard to achieve, hundreds of thousands of signatures, working hard, voting to put this protection for our freedoms into the Michigan Constitution, will all be ripped away if that happens. Imagine what this would mean for a woman who learns that the pregnancy she desperately wants is not viable and her own life is at risk. This is actually happening, unfortunately, all the time right now in the states that have severe restrictions. And I will never forget hearing a woman talking about her own experience of being told she wasn't close to death enough to get care in the emergency room. She had to go out and sit in her car until she was so close to death that they felt they could treat her. Doctors are now talking to their attorney before they're talking to other doctors or women and their families and so on. And we're seeing so many things happen. So many things now. We've already seen one study showing in Texas that there's been an 8% increase in infant mortality. That means children don't live until their first birthday because something has happened. So, who decides what happens to someone in that situation? The woman supported by her family and her doctor? Or a right-wing Supreme Court and Republicans in the United States Senate or any other elected body? Today we have an incredibly important vote. It will tell us where every single member of this chamber stands. Do you think that women should have the basic freedom to make decisions about our own health? That anyone should have the freedom to make their decisions about their own health? It's as simple as that. We know where we stand. We're working every day to defend our freedoms, to make decisions about our own health care, to make sure it's not a politician, it's not a judge, that it's women, their faith, their family, their doctors, that people who are directly involved are making those decisions. The women of this country should have the freedom to make our own decisions about our own health care, our own lives, and our own futures. That's what this vote is about. And we're not going to give up until we have those freedoms fully protected. I would urge colleagues to pass the Reproductive Freedom for Women Act. I would yield the floor. Thank you.
Madam President.
Senator from Minnesota.
Madam President, I join my colleague from Michigan and all of the other senators who have spoken out on this topic today to say that now is the time to protect women's reproductive freedom. I thank Leader Schumer for organizing this group of senators, and I thank Senator Murray for her work on this. I thank you as our newest senator for being part of this. A few weeks ago, America marked 2 years since the Supreme Court overturned half a century of precedent and stripped away every woman's right to make her own health care decisions, going against the 70 to 80% of Americans who believe that this decision should be made by a woman and her family and her doctor and not by politicians. And no, they don't want our colleagues sitting in the waiting room. In the wake of that disastrous decision, women across the country remain at the mercy of a patchwork of state laws that are creating chaos when it comes to accessing reproductive health care. Today, 22 states have passed laws to fully or partially ban abortion, and 1/3 of women of reproductive age live under extreme and dangerous bans. For instance, just 2 weeks ago in our neighboring state of Iowa, right below Minnesota, the state Supreme Court allowed a 6-week abortion ban to take effect. You couple that with what's gone on in South Dakota and North Dakota, and you understand why in Minnesota, clinics have moved across the border. That's what's happening in every state in this nation right now. In states across the country, women are also being forced away from emergency rooms and left to travel hundreds of miles for health care. I think of the woman in Oklahoma who was told that she needed to wait in the parking lot until she was much sicker, or as the doctor put it, on the verge of a heart attack. I also think of the woman from Louisiana who was turned away from 2 emergency rooms during a miscarriage because the doctors feared prosecution for providing care under stringent abortion laws. And I don't think any of us will ever forget the heartbreaking story of the 10-year-old girl in Ohio who had to go to Indiana in order to get a legal abortion after she was raped. A 10-year-old girl. People didn't believe the story. Remember that? And then it turned out it was completely true. They said it was a hoax. It wasn't. It's what's happening right now in America. Doctors are being threatened with prosecution for doing their jobs, and access to fertility treatments is at risk for families who are desperately trying to get pregnant. Like many of my colleagues, I did a series of 4th of July parades over the last week. I think I did 8 of them. And in nearly every parade, someone came up with their child, a little baby, sometimes more grown up, and said, she wouldn't be here, he wouldn't be here without IVF. But right now, all of those things that we have expected for so long are at risk. Access to contraception, access to abortion drugs that are safe in dozens of countries. Because while the Supreme Court gave us a temporary reprieve in the mifepristone case, we know that a number of other states are now gearing up to bring similar lawsuits because that was just thrown out based on a legal requirement, a legal standing for who could bring the case, not actually on the merits. This is our current reality, but it doesn't have to be our future. This is a pivotal moment for America. Are we going to move forward and protect freedom, which has long been a hallmark of our nation? Or are we going to go further backwards in history? Not just to the 1950s, but to the 1850s. The Supreme Court's decision threatens women's health and freedom no matter where you live in this country, and it demands a swift response. All 3 branches of government have a responsibility to protect people's rights. And if one branch doesn't do its job, then it's up to another to step in. That means it's on Congress to codify Roe v. Wade into law. Every American woman should be able to get the care she needs without navigating unnecessary bans. And the choice of whether and when to start a family should be just that. While we are here today, I also see Senator Murray is on the floor, and I want to thank her for organizing yesterday's group of speakers on important legislation related to reproductive freedom. In addition to codifying Roe v. Wade into law, we need to pass other common sense measures, like my bill, the Uphold Privacy Act, which we tried to move forward thanks to Senator Murray yesterday, unfortunately was blocked. This bill sets limits on how companies can use people's health data. This is particularly important following recent troubling reports of companies collecting and sharing data related to reproductive health care. Just this year, we learned that a company allegedly tracked people's visits to nearly 600 Planned Parenthood locations across the country and provided that data for an anti-abortion ad campaign. That is just wrong. No one can believe that is happening today in America, but it is. And with women's right to reproductive care under attack, it is even more dangerous. That's why enacting common sense limits on how companies can use people's personal data is so critical right now. All of this comes down to one question. Who should get to make personal healthcare decisions for women? The woman herself, her doctor, family, consultation, or a politician that she's never going to meet, that isn't going to be looking out for her? To me, the answer is clear. As our country enters its third year without Roe v. Wade, I continue to stand with my colleagues in the fight for reproductive freedom. We stand on the side of the American people who have come together time and time again. In Kentucky, where they voted for a governor who is standing up for reproductive health care. In Kansas, in the middle of the prairie, where no one expected it, the first real test of this, where Democrats and Republicans voted on the side of freedom. In Ohio, in a referendum where by 11 points, the people of Ohio stood up for freedom. Or in the legislative races in Virginia, or in a congressional race in Long Island, or in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. The message is clear where the American people are. This isn't about red states or blue states. Think of the states that I just listed. This is about freedom. So we refuse to back down. We refuse to give up. We refuse to settle for a reality in which our daughters have fewer rights than their mothers and grandmothers. This may be our reality right now, but colleagues, it does not have to be our future. Madam President, I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. Today we are going to vote on a bill that offers a simple statement of values. Do you support a woman's freedom to make her own healthcare decisions? For the vast majority of Americans, the answer is yes, without question. We know that because the American people have been speaking out loudly and repeatedly and at every opportunity to oppose Republicans' extreme abortion bans. The record here is remarkable and unmistakable. Since Trump and Republicans succeeded at overturning Roe v. Wade and ripping away a constitutional right from our daughters and granddaughters, every single time abortion rights have been on the ballot, abortion rights have won every time. But the American people have not just been speaking with their own votes, they have been using their voices and sharing their own personal stories of the nightmares that Republican abortion bans have put them through. Women denied medical care for a miscarriage because of abortion bans. Women turned away from hospitals because their doctors' hands were tied until they lost over half of their blood, until their husband found them unconscious on the floor, until the only option was an emergency hysterectomy, or tragically, until it was simply too late. Children who couldn't get abortion care after being raped. A teenager delivering a baby clutching a teddy bear, forced through pregnancy by Republican politicians. This isn't some dystopian prediction. This has all happened recently in the United States of America because of Donald Trump and Republicans' anti-abortion extremism. Just last month, the New York Times profiled the story of one mother in Idaho who woke up with heavy bleeding in her 20th week of pregnancy. She was leaking amniotic fluid. She went to the emergency room. She was told nothing they could do to help her. Sorry. Because of Idaho's extreme abortion ban, it meant that any doctor who gave her the abortion care she so desperately needed would be risking their loss of their medical license and jail time and heavy fines. The best they could do was give her an emergency flight to another state. And when she arrived, nurses remembered her saying, "I just need to stay alive so I can be around for my 2 other kids." That same hospital in Idaho has already had to airlift 6 pregnant women out of the state for emergency abortion care this year. Madam President, that's just one hospital in one state and one horrific variation of the many nightmares that are happening on loop across the country as a direct result of the Republican abortion bans. And Madam President, I'm going to keep saying it. A forced pregnancy does not have to make headlines to make someone's life a living hell. This is not an issue that Republicans can run away from, no matter how much they try to. Donald Trump, a convicted felon and a liar, is trying to tell us he doesn't know anything about Project 2025. That is the playbook that has been written by some of his top advisors for him. He may as well be saying he has no idea who named Trump Tower. We all know Donald Trump ended Roe v. Wade. We all know Republicans championed that for decades, and we know that Trump will absolutely ban abortion nationwide. Republicans do not get to pretend they support the health of a mother while ignoring the horror stories happening today across the country and urging the Supreme Court to rule against ensuring abortion is available in emergencies. Republicans do not get to pretend that they support IVF and birth control while championing a national fetal personhood bill and voting down bills to protect the right to IVF and birth control. Republicans do not get to pretend they only want state politicians controlling women's most personal decisions while supporting national abortion bans, including the fetal personhood bill I just mentioned, supporting efforts to strike down access to medication abortion nationwide, blocking efforts to protect women who might travel out of state for care, and even blocking protections for doctors in states like mine where abortion is legal. And I cannot stress enough how transparently unserious it is for Trump and Republicans to pretend they are somehow returning abortion to the people, when in reality, they are doing the exact opposite. Republicans are giving politicians power that once belonged to an individual woman, letting politicians force women to stay pregnant. And they're trying to sell that as giving people a bigger voice in this issue. Do Republicans really think Americans are that stupid? Do Republicans really think they can take away a constitutional right and convince us it is a win for freedom? That is insulting. Here's an idea. You want to really give the people a say on abortion? How about you let each person decide with their doctor what's right for them? How's that for small government? How's that for letting people decide? Madam President, if Republicans really want to let people make their own decisions on abortions, that's news for me. It would certainly be news to the countless women who've had that choice ripped away from them by Republican politicians over the past 2 years. But they have a chance to prove it right here, today, right now, when we vote on my Reproductive Freedom for Women Act. This is a plain, up or down vote on whether you support women being able to make their own reproductive health care decisions. It doesn't force anything, doesn't cost anything. It's actually just a half-page bill simply saying that women should have the basic freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Seriously, that is it. Simple as it gets. If you care at all, even the tiniest bit, about protecting women's access to health care and allowing women to make their own decisions about their pregnancies, you should support this bill. Now, make no mistake, I'm not holding my breath here today, but I am going to be holding Republicans accountable. Donald Trump is trying to rewrite his abortion record, but I will not let him or anyone else off the hook. If Republicans are going to force women to stay pregnant, we are going to force them to be honest with the American people about their extreme position. And by the way, Democrats are going to keep fighting to restore the rights the American people have been so clear that they want back. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Leader.
First, let me thank the senator from Washington State, the Senate Pro Tem, President Pro Tem, for her amazing leadership on this issue. She's the lead sponsor of the legislation. and on so many other issues across the spectrum, but particularly on women's rights and women's health care. There's no more clarion stronger voice than the senator from Washington, so I thank her for that. Now today, Madam President, Senate Republicans must answer a simple question. Do they believe that women should have the right to make their own health care choices, yes or no? The Reproductive Freedom for Women Act is exceedingly simple. All it does is express support for a woman's right to choose. That's it, no more, no less. It should be an easy yes vote. My Republican colleagues have a choice. Vote yes and stand with women who want their rights protected, or stand with Donald Trump and MAGA radicals who want to see those rights taken away. We know where the American people stand on the freedom of choice. Over 80% of Americans, including 2/3 of Republicans, agree that health care decisions, including abortion, should be between a woman and her doctor. But Americans are rightfully worried that reproductive rights are becoming extinct in this country. They see what's happening at the Supreme Court. They see the attacks on women's rights in states like Texas and Florida and Alabama and Idaho and beyond. The American people want to know where their senators stand on freedom of choice. By voting on reproductive freedoms, we are moving forward because it's very important and very reasonable for members to be asked to take a position on such a vital issue. If Senate Republicans genuinely trust women to make their own reproductive choices, then they should not block this bill today. And I want to tell our Republican colleagues, the American people are watching how we vote. You can run, but you can't hide. All of America is going to know whether you're for women's reproductive rights or not by this vote. No excuses. This is it. The American people want to see who will defend their fundamental freedoms and who will not. Again, let me thank Senator Murray for leading this bill. Let me thank every female senator on our side of the aisle for co-sponsoring it along with me. We need a yes vote, and I ask for the yeas and nays.